are doing. Okay, so we're just gonna. It's
Let's
just
do
about.
it.
It's just about to start.
We're live. It says it's live.
Yeah, it's coming live. It's just about to be live. Yes.
So you haven't
Uh,
launched it.
um. Yeah, well, it's fine. Let's go ahead. Hi,
Okay.
Angelo. How are you?
Great, AJ. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
Good to have you on board again. I've been meaning to talk to you. There's a lot to talk about. Obviously, last time we didn't get a chance to complete everything, so it's good to have you on board again. Where are you at the moment? It looks like a hotel or some sort.
Yes, I'm actually in Hong Kong right now. I just in between like moving to places, but in Hong Kong. So I've been based here for the last 6 7 years, and altogether 27 years in China.
Wow, amazing. So we've got a lot to talk about. Let's not waste any more time. Let's kind of carry on talking. So the first subject I wanted to talk about is Scholz's trip to China. And there was a press conference, and in the beginning of the press conference, he was saying nice things, and then it went a bit downhill. He started talking about Taiwan, started saying that President Xi needs to tell Putin to stop the war, and then he started talking about human rights issues. And I was just rolling my eyes, and I was thinking, "Oh God, you know, you come all the way to China, you ask for help, and then you start throwing all of these insults at them." So, what did you think about Scholz's trip to China?
Well, you have to think about internal politics too. He needs to show his people back in Germany that he's still criticizing China. That's part of the game. Of course, when he's coming with all those CEOs, major large industries from Germany to China, he's actually the one that needs China, not the opposite. But this is like just words that he has to say, because he needs he needs to confront people back home, not only in Germany but actually Europe. Because Europe has a certain stance against China, and he's going against that. Because, well, the trend is about finding solutions to decouple from China. So this decoupling started from the US, and the EU naturally followed, because EU is actually an extension of the US. The EU is actually a US project after World War II, that was created to destroy nation state and to better control Europe. It was funded by the CIA. The father of the EU, who's considered Jean Monnet, was actually on the payroll of the CIA. So you see, he has to please people, but at the same time, he's got huge pressure from large industries. Keep in mind that what with the high energy costs, uh, because of this Russian Ukraine crisis, they will lose a lot of businesses. Germany over long term is going to be desindustrialized. So now they shut down the relationship with the main supplier of energy, and then China is the largest trading partner. For the last 5 to 6 years, China has been number one trading with the trade partner for Germany. So they want to preserve what is left, because imagine if they were to shut down this relationship with China. I mean, Germany would be over. Germany would live out of services. Would be a big Disneyland. Where you'd go there to see how was like people go to Rome and ancient Egypt. Because that's what's going to happen. And it's starting desindustrialization. It's going to be a big thing, and again, who's the fault? We have to ask who's the fault. It's the green. I call it the green Greta sect, because it's a sect. And if you
Yeah.
look at what they really stand for, they are pro-war. And actually, do they care about ecology? Not much. Just think about it. Shutting down Nord Stream 2, how
Yeah.
much damage it is doing to the world. To the ecology. Those guys, they shifted completely, and they who's talking about climate change. It's no, they there was the talking point to get into power. And I think I wouldn't be surprised that they are going to have sanctions between Scholz, who's social democrat, against the Green, and the Green are going to be a one-term party. After next term, they are going to lose massively because people have been cheated. It's just Green are just a branding of radical people, Nazi rebranded. That's what I.
Yeah. I mean, sounds like a massive scam to me. You call yourself the Green Party, but then you start increasing coal power plants, you start burning more coal, you start causing more pollution because you cut off all the you cut off your gas supplies from Russia, so you're obviously forced to burn coal. Most people in Germany are burning firewood as well, and then you're restarting all these nuclear facilities, and then you are pro-war as well. You're sending weapons to Ukraine. You're sending ships all the way to the Taiwanese Strait. I mean, how is that green? I mean, that sounds opposite of what green people would do. I mean, sounds
I
like a
just
complete scam.
Yeah, AJ, I just give you an example. Well, besides the fact that the most pro-war, pro-NATO were the Green. I mean, all along, I'm not even. This is pre-Ukraine war. The Green had been always pro-NATO, very extreme. But then they were the first one to be against Nord Stream 2, and this is before the war. Keep in mind that Nord Stream 2 and actually natural gas, is actually what is needed for Germany for the transition, ecological transition, to fossil free energy. They had to go through gas, which is way better than coal. uh, so it's just being absurd, and I like to say that those guys, they are so far from the reality. I mean, look at the background they have. I think who's that? Is Barberk. Barberk is what is his background? He used to write books for children. I mean, those are the people in charge. Those are the people in charge. It is just madness. And it's sad. We are talking about a country, Germany, that has been striving for a long time. Actually, the last 20 to 30 years, there was prosperity in Germany because of low energy costs coming from Russia. And it was shooting one's own leg. I
Yeah.
mean, what, even more than that. And they are sleepwalking. What they're doing is just complete madness. I think people don't, the inflation, the inflation you have right now, that is just the tip of the iceberg. What is going to be much more damaging to German people is going to be the desindustrialization. I
Yeah.
mean, think about all those companies that are going to leave Germany because high energy costs. There are some industries where the cost of product are up to 30%. Cost of energy in their product are up to 30%. When you have that cost, that double, triple, then you are no more competitive. So where are you going to move? First choice would be the US. Yeah, and then it's going to be Turkey. Turkey is going to have a still cheap cost, and China. I mean, you are talking about being more independent, self-sufficient. You're going actually to the complete opposite. They are going to be re- uh, much more dependent on the US and China as well.
Yeah, of course. And not a lot of people know this, but Scholz went to China with a huge business community. And we're talking about the leaders of Volkswagen, Siemens, BASF, and many other massive companies. So it sounds like all of these business companies wouldn't go to China for no reason. And it does sound like they're looking to expand. And it makes perfect sense to go to China to expand because energy is still cheap compared to Europe. They've got, 2 or 3 gas pipelines coming from Russia. They've got a huge amounts of renewables that's increasing every single year. They've got hydropower. They've got nuclear facilities coming online every single year as well. So energy is still cheap in China. So it makes sense to go to China. Labor is still cheap compared to Europe. If you go to the United States, it doesn't sound to me like a very much of a good business environment to work, because once you're in the United States, you have to follow a lot of rules. You're being told what to do. You are told who to sell it to. If United States tells you, oh, you cannot sell to China, your biggest market, you're gonna have to listen to them. And it doesn't sound like a good business environment to work in. You completely lose your sovereignty, and you are actually, you're as a slave if you go to the United States. I mean, what do you think?
Absolutely, but well, I think if you have a business, large business like this, it's about hedging your bets. So I think companies like BASF, if they're smart, you need to have production both in the US and in China. You mentioned renewable energy in China. It's just hydropower. We don't talk much about this, but what they are doing in Tibet is massive, massive. I don't know if you are familiar with the Three Gorge project. This is
Yes, I am. Yeah.
it is the largest dam in the world. They have a project which is 2 to 3 times bigger in Tibet and multiple dams. Just that single dam that they are doing in Tibet. I forgot the name, but that's larger
Uh,
than
I think it's called the Yarlung Sampo River
yeah,
and
exactly.
the
But
Great Bend.
that's the river, but just the dam. I forgot just the name of the
Yeah.
dam. But that Yalong Sampo, there's a dam that actually could produce the equivalent of the electricity needed for the UK. Can you
Yeah.
imagine?
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of renewable energy, and they're still criticizing China on not delivering. Actually, China is actually really on board with climate change, but not only because of climate change. I would say China has to be to focus a lot on renewable energy just because of China being dependent on fossil fuel. China is actually have large reserve in Xinjiang of both gas and oil. But what China is actually being obsessed about is self-sufficiency, because China saw what they did with Russia. You know, they saw that actually Russia has been working really hard on the last 8 years to be self-sufficient. Well,
Yeah.
China is the same. The reason is very simple. It's they are really afraid of having a blockade to be done on the Malacca Strait.
Yeah.
Malacca Strait has around 70% of the trade of China is going through the sea, and most of it is going through the Malacca Strait. And this would be the most probable scenario for the US, because they are not going to. I personally think the US is not going to fight China directly,
Yeah.
but what they want to do is contain China economically, destroy its economy, and hopefully have a regime change. People being really upset, but it doesn't work though. I mean, the same is the same as what they're hoping to achieve in Russia, to have people just to be so frustrated that they would turn against Putin. It will not happen
Yeah.
in China, and I've seen it personally, first-hand experience in Venezuela. They've destroyed completely the economy there, but
Mm.
people, they still have a good education to understand that the most important is uh, to keep their sovereignty, because once you sell your sovereignty, it's
Yeah.
all. And you
Yeah.
see what's
Exactly.
happening right now with countries like Germany. Germany is not a sovereign state. Germany, since World War II, has, I don't know how many troops, 20, 30,000 US troops. But you've seen they've been completely hijacked by the US. And it's not the only country. All the countries that lost World War II, Germany, Italy,
Mm.
Japan,
Yeah.
they are still hijacked. Their democracy are completely hijacked. Japan in the 50s, 60s, the CIA funded the current, I think the name is LDP, the party in power. They funded that's what they did. They funded the LDP. In Italy, the communists were supposed to get into power. They were very strong in the 60s, 70s. Well, the CIA meddled. We had a terrorist attack. They were attributed to the communists. Uh, and Germany, I mean, Germany just, it's it's just the worst, the worst. And I think there's a question these days, especially when it comes to Nord Stream 2, that people say that Germany is not in the plot. But I'm thinking that, you know what? when you look at the people running Germany at this moment, well, they're not, they don't care much about, they're not working for Germany. They're working for globalist agenda. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised that they are on board with this because, well, have you heard some politicians, like people in power in Germany, speaking out about this? I mean, this is a major event, the blowing of Nord Stream 2. There would be, I mean, they should be all over an
Yeah.
investigation, just trying to find out who did that.
Yeah.
They're just being silent,
Yeah.
completely silent. Silent.
Exactly.
This is a single event that is going to destroy the economy. It's over for the next
Yeah.
20 to 30 years. And they
Exactly. Complete. If the West thought that Russians did it, it would have been on every single paper. It would have been all over Twitter. Nobody would see the back of it for weeks or months. But it's completely gone silent. Twitter doesn't even trend about it. No paper is even mentioning it. It's absolutely. It's like it's never happened. It's like nobody's is even mentioning it.
Yeah, I find something really interesting, AJ. I mean, I'm not for ideology driven. I mean, socialist, capitalist. I mean, I think for me it's all BS. It's a system to put people into boxes and to divide them. So that's my opinion.
Sure.
But I find something really interesting when it comes to the posture on Russia all over Europe. Which party are actually standing for their sovereignty and are actually the most rational at this moment are the party that are labeled the far right. I mean, sadly, those are the only one. But they uh, who names actually those labels usually are the mainstream media and the elites. When you are labeled far right or far left, that means you might be doing something right that is bothering the elites. But you see, right now, who's speaking out against this madness of sanctions against Ukraine, against Russia, which in fact actually a sanction against themselves, more than to Russia. But it's all for what they call far right parties in Europe. Well, you have Orban, you have Meloni. Well, let's see what she's going to do.
Yep.
But then you have what they call the far right in Germany. And where's the left? I mean, where is the left, the traditional left that was anti-NATO? I remember when I was a kid in the 80s, we had who was anti-NATO were the left. You had the communists and the socialists. So those ones have been hijacked. They've been infiltrated and by the elites. It's just I just cannot understand that you have right now a left in Europe which is pro-war, which is the most pro-NATO.
Yeah.
It's complete madness.
Exactly. I remember when Alanina Baerbock recently said in an interview, as long as they are supporting Ukraine, it doesn't really matter what happens to the German people, and that's what she
Yeah,
said.
she said, I will not listen to my constituents, to my voters. I know they'll go against that, but what is most important is Ukraine. I'm like, well, you aren't you supposed to be elected by those people and you're supposed to
Exactly.
follow their wishes, and it's just openly telling people that politicians right now in the EU and in the US are following whoever funds them, but not whoever votes for them. So people, people should review their definition of democracy. I mean, really, basic stuff, basic stuff. Democracy, democratos, power to the people. The system it's being created is actually completely the opposite. Well, the reason is also, you know, you need to look at the rules of the game. The rules of the game in Europe and in the US was written by the elites. So whoever writes the rule of the game controls the outcome. I can make up with you, AJ, any games. If I make the rules, I can make sure that I make the rules so I win every time. That's as simple as that. So it's when people are voting, it's just to release VAR, but it's just an
Yeah.
illusion.
Yeah, when Blinken travels around the world and he calls it a rules-based international order, you know that the rules-based order is the United States rules. And one thing about rules, you can change your rules as you go along. So it's all about United States rules. It doesn't really matter what the rest of the world thinks.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think I wish, you might hear me a lot, like praising what China does. But I feel actually bad at the same time because I love more my country than China. But I see so many good things being done there that we could take so much inspiration from what is being done there. I've seen for the last 27 years prosperity. I mean, a revolution in terms of prosperity. And this is shared prosperity in China. And I've seen nothing in the collective West, absolutely nothing. Actually, less freedom, more control, and just a basic human right. I mean, we have different definition of human rights, really. But what I learned from China is that human right in China needs to be tangible. How China measure human rights is how much food do I have on the table? How much do I have as a disposable income? This is tangible. Uh, can I put my kids into school? If I get sick, do I have universal health care? I mean, do the state takes care, the system takes care of me? Longevity, you know, over the last 20 years, I people can live 2 3 years more. Why is it so? Well, because good healthcare, there's less pollution, less people having cancer. Tangible things. And what is interesting is that system, which is run by the CPC, they anticipate the needs of the people. They do tens of thousands of surveys all year long to ask people, what do you need? Because we are going to deliver. But we really need to know what you need. Instead, what we have in the collective West is that the policies goes against what people want. People want universal healthcare in the US, they'll never get that. Even though 70% of people want that, but they'll never get it. It's ultimately serving the interest of the elites. In China, it's the opposite. They are accountable. They make a 5-year plan and they need to deliver. After 5 years, there's a check and balance. Did you deliver? Yes or no? The day that you have a politician in China that lies to the people, is out. When you look at the collective West, the leaders, they lie all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. You have economists, the head of the EC Bank. I mean, what was Lagardère? Well, she said inflation came out from nowhere. I mean, come on, you are running the EU.
Yeah.
Do- how dare you say that inflation came from nowhere? You're making
Exactly.
people stupid. I mean,
Yeah.
really.
Exactly, and you're right. And I remember when the Fed said that inflation was transitory, like a year ago or something, and then next thing you know, inflation's gone up 10%, 20%, 30%. Is that these people know what they're doing? I mean, that sounds like a bunch of school children just messing around when they go to work.
No, well, we've been lied to about COVID. Some basic lies, that were, the vaccines, because of the vaccine, it wouldn't spread. I mean, just those lies. If you were to go against that narrative, you'd be completely cancelled, and that's the society we're living on. There's a cognitive dissonance from people too, because they just believe too much in the state, in the system, because it's over and over. They watch TV all day long with the same messages. We are the best. It's just one side of the information. There's no more journalists, which forces us, you and I. Why are we doing what we do? Well, because journalists journalists are not doing their job, and
Exactly.
sadly we have to take out of or private time, just to go on live and just tell the people, well, this, this is not the truth,
Well, the journalists are not real journalists. They're just stooges. You're working for the government, you're working for your editor, and your editor tells you what to do. Your editor will say, write a piece about China, but make sure it's bad. Don't write anything good. And then the editor signs it off, and that's how it works. Let's answer this question. Somebody sent a super chat.
That's a very
Isn't the
good question.
Strait of
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't the Strait of Malacca surrounded by countries friendly to China? So shall I answer it? Then I'll let you carry on after that.
Please go ahead. Please.
So, so you have to understand that the United States Navy is a blue water navy, and it's correct. The Strait of Malacca is surrounded by countries friendly to China. However, you have to go in the Malacca Strait, and you have to get out of the Malacca Strait, and that is going to be controlled by the U.S. Navy, submarines, and also there's some islands next to the Malacca Strait owned by India, and then there's some huge military bases there. The problem is the Chinese Navy is not quite a blue water navy yet. So if this was blocked, it would have been very, very difficult to go to United States Navy and try and blow them out the water, because the Chinese Navy is what you call a green water navy. They protect the Chinese mainland and around that area. So they are not a blue water navy yet. To be a blue water navy, you need 800 so bases around the world. And this is what United States has. They've got 800 bases around the world. They can stop off at each and every one of these bases. They can refuel, rearm, and things like that. And so this is why United States has got major strength in blue water navy. But the problem is, when there's a battle, I don't think United States is stupid enough to go near Chinese shores if there's a battle over Taiwan, because they know these aircraft carriers and ships will be blown out the water with Chinese hypersonic missiles, and also, United States know they have a very good submarine fleet as well. They have one of the best submarine fleets, so they will try and use that to their advantage. And they will also use their allies as targets. So they will use Japan, South Korea maybe to launch attacks from there. They'll probably use Australia. And these countries will be targets for China, because they will be using these countries like they are using Ukraine, and they will fight till every single last Japanese. They'll fight till every single last South Korean. They'll fight till every single last Australian, possibly even Philippines, depending which side they go to. And while United States will be like firing shots from the distance and doing what they are doing now with Ukraine. What's your thoughts, Angelo?
All great point. Absolutely. China doesn't have a power projection force. So basically, China is strong when it comes to the China Sea. And what you mentioned just before is very interesting. You see, in Ukraine, the US is fighting to the last Ukrainian. If it's not enough, it's going to be to the last European. In Asia, it's going to be to the last Japanese, to the last Taiwanese. Koreans probably are not going to go into this, but maybe to the last Australian. That is very something. If you look at history, the US has done that in the Second World War. Keep in mind that the US came into the war. I'm not talking about Hollywood movies. Hollywood movies is what average Joe believe. In reality, the US they just waited. Actually, they funded. They were supporting actually Hitler at the beginning. Funding, and actually there was a Hitler. Germany had they lacked a lot of technology. There was a lot of technology which was actually given by Ford, by IG Farben, through IG Farben. And then, so once Germany was started to win, what they did was to back the USSR. What they did with the USSR was to lease agreement. What do you call it? Land lease agreement. And they actually, the USSR and Russia had been repaying for a long, long time. It took like 30 to 40 years. And that's what they're actually doing with Ukraine. keep in mind that they're not giving weapons to Ukraine. It's a lend-lease agreement. Ukraine is going to repay that if Ukraine is still a country, after the war, it's going to be repay that for 1 or 2 generations. So what the US did was actually to use European lives, Asian lives, and they came into the war at the end when everything was destroyed, and they were there. There was the only economy which was untouched. They ended up with 50% of world GDP because while Europe was being destroyed, US
Yep.
was heavily producing arms, selling to the whole world, and they ended up with over 50% of world gold reserves.
Yeah.
And when you are at the end, you are the only superpower left. You are able to rise the rule of the game. So this is why they came up with the UN. They took their hands, the power, they took their hands on the UN, and that's why the UN is in New York. They started with those new institutions, IMF, World Bank, which are institutions created to control the world, especially the global south under the debt trap, the debt trap. And also, it's a tool to liberalize economies around the world. But what I mean by liberalizing, the real meaning is how I can rape your country, take all the resources, and buy all state-owned assets. That's what they mean by liberalizing. Additional to that, hijacking of democracy, because IMF, they lend you some money, but there are lots of conditions attached, including it needs to be a democracy that we like.
Yep. Yep. Of course. And you're 100% right. I mean, after the Second World War, the United States became the sole superpower of the world, and they basically used Europeans' destruction to kind of take over. And you're 100% right. And after the Second World War, there's a lot of German Nazis went over to the United States, and they did a lot of technology transfers as well. Things
That's a
like the atomic bomb, the nuclear bomb was the first
yeah. Well,
invented in Germany. And
that's the paperclip project. Actually, you had lots of Nazis that were recycled. Some Nazis were recycled into the EU, actually. Walter Hallstein, which was the president of the EU, was another name back then. The EU changed names, since World War II, but the project started after World War II. So the first president was Walter Hallstein, which was just a Nazi recycled. Also they recycled Nazis into NATO, and I mean the smartest brains, they went into the US.
yeah, I mean, Germans had a major arms industry, and they were building some arms which was way ahead of the Europeans. Their V2 rockets, for example, but they were researching nuclear bombs. They were the first country who were researching nuclear bombs, and this technology went to the United States, and then then obviously United States got hold of the technology and started testing. And we all know what happened next to Japan after that.
Yeah, and they did recycle Nazis, collaborators all around Europe under the Gladio operation. If you look at actually the Nazi project in Ukraine, actually started from the NATO, the Gladio operation. They started right after World War II to fund those Nazi movement in Ukraine. Ukraine has been a spine for the USSR all along, because they had guerrilla. After World War II, Ukraine, you had already this Bandera movement, which was very active all along. It never actually stopped. So this is nothing new. The Russia knew all along about it, but it's been increased, massively, especially after the first color revolution in 2004, where there was the Orange Revolution in Ukraine. They started already funding massively those extremist movements, which, by the way, were actually hooligans. Those people, they were, like the right sector. The right sector was just a fringe of the stadium, at the right side, called the right sector, and those were thugs, hooligans. I mean, and you find those same people getting to power in 2014. They were extremely influential. They had what we call the informal power, even though when they were, they were into politics, they had only 4% of the votes, but they had the key the key positions, and then they were feared by everyone. They had this, the power of violence that, I mean, even the police and the army, they wouldn't dare to confront them because they're just mad, driven by ideology.
That's correct. Yeah. So let's go back to Japan. I mean, people are talking about European companies and Europe crashing, but what about Japan? I mean, I've seen the yen literally close to collapse. It's falling like it's in a waterfall or something. And what the hell is happening to the Japanese economy? I mean, first of all, it goes all the way back to the time when Japan signed that accord, Plaza Accord, and then
And
Plaza Accord. Then the economy kind of
so,
stagnated for 20 years, and now they went along with the sanctions against Russia, and Russia obviously kicked them out of various projects, and they've also stopped supplying them gas and oil. So, and their economy has been in free fall. The yen is falling. I mean, why the hell would Japan do this to themselves? I mean, when you talk about Europe, it's one thing, but Japan seems to be another bunch of fools in Asia. I mean, what's your thoughts?
I would say Japan might be a bit more hawkish for against China than Russia. I think they're backtracking when it comes to Russia, especially on the gas supply. They have large project in the Sakhalin Island, and so they're backtracking, but they're still quite hawkish when it comes to China. But they're not following just blindly, completely blindly, the U.S. agenda, especially when it comes to the microchips ban, with the of selling microchips to China. They're actually backtracking. They cannot go all the way. I mean, this is like a suicide. And some politicians in Japan, they might just realize that. It's not only about containing China. It's about transferring technologies and industries from Japan to the U.S. The same as they are disindustrializing Europe for the benefit of the U.S. They don't want to go into that direction. So I'd be a bit cautious. Big question mark, but Japan is a strong ally, but I'm not sure it will go all the way. You mentioned the Plaza Accord. Actually, the Plaza Accord was the same as the US wanted to do with China. Japan's economy was surpassing the US. I think it was 84 or 87, and they at some point you had the G7 that went against Japan, and
Yeah.
they put conditions, just to contain China. So Japan overnight became not competitive anymore.
Mm.
Because of the currency, it was actually related to Japanese currency and was no more competitive. And I remember during that time where you had extremely the same as you have xenophobic feelings, in the media right now. They had anti-Japanese feelings. They were destroying TVs on, in the media. They were like, you had like people destroying TVs, Japanese cars. They were
Yeah.
extremely anti-Japanese, and I think Japanese should have really just go back to history, what the US has done to them. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. You had in California, you had concentration camps for Japanese. Japanese that were holding US passports in California were put into camps. They took their assets, they were put into camps. Then you have the Plaza Accord. It's a constant humiliation.
Yeah.
They have, plus they have, I don't know, probably 50,000 troops in what's the island? Oh,
Yeah.
today
Okinawa. Okinawa.
Okinawa,
Yeah.
exactly. Which, by the way, Okinawa was a neutral state before. It was for a long time. It was a kingdom. The Oh man,
I
was a
mean, the
kingdom.
Okinawans are always protesting to get the US troops out because there's always their women are being raped and killed, and there's no action gets taken against the US troops because of the the deal they have between the US troops and against Japan. So they can pretty much do whatever they want to Japan and not get tried or go to court for it. And you're right, 100% being humiliated. But one of the questions somebody said by F. Chow, so I think what he was trying to say is, why are they allowing themselves to be humiliated after everything that the US has done to them, including the bombs and Plaza Accord?
Well, it's the US has made itself very sexy. Just think about it. From history books to Hollywood, I mean, we live in an ecosystem where we are constantly hammered that the US is full of freedom. It's made sexy. I mean, really think about it. Just China, when you look at on the surface, I'm talking about average Joe that doesn't have time for research, hasn't been to China. China is not sexy. The US is sexy. Just it's made sexy just because of all those movies, and that works at the subconscious mind. So when the Japanese they look at the US, they see something cool. When they look at China, because of all the brainwashing they've been through, they look at something which is bad. It's not appealing. And that's the weakness of China, is the soft power. There's so many positive things, but China is not good at that. And also, well, keep in mind they made sure that China was, there was no penetration of Chinese culture. Even now, you have the Confucius Institutes around the world, which are there just to teach about language, Chinese language and Chinese culture. It's not, there's no meddling. It's just about how we can actually offer our culture and language to people who want to learn around the world. But they're closing lots of institutes around the world just because of this decoupling.
Yeah,
So
especially
yeah.
especially in UK, Rishi Sunak has said he will go ahead and close them, and I think it's just a bad idea because you are basically signing your own death warrant, especially with the way the economy is at the moment. This is the time when you need to reach out and get as many economic partners around the world as possible, not decouple with as many partners as you can. It's just a suicide to me, to be honest.
Yeah, there's something interesting. You see what they did when there was a Cold War. They built a wall. There's really this wall between the East and the West, and a lot of people thought that Russia would do the same. Just to protect itself, and actually it was the opposite. Who built that wall? Who actually started putting restriction on Russia to come to Europe? Was Europe. Not Russians. The opposite, that Russian actually started giving facilities to go to Russia as a tourist, because they know that if you have tourists coming to Russia, they will realize that Russia has lots of freedom. It's a very modern country. It's thriving. They are good people. What the collective West doesn't want is people just to really see with their own eyes. The same as me. I mean, just the fact that I live in China, I see with my own eyes. I can go back and say, well, what you saying about China is completely wrong. It's absolutely wrong. So and I feel, just, I mean, there's so many things we could tell about China, but just one figure. There are 160 million Chinese that they go abroad, travel abroad every year. You know what? They all go back.
Yep, they do.
Why do they go back? Because China is a good place. There's a good quality of life. It's been delivering to people. People are happy. They are happy. It's probably, when you look at how positive people are in China, we talk about 90%, really 90%, because they've seen, over generations. The mother of my son, she tells me about a childhood, and it's very sad. Candies, she didn't know about candies, and she's not that old. She's 40 years old, but she didn't know about candies. They were really poor. Now they're in Hong Kong and they have a really good lives. And why is it so? Well, that's the contribution of the system, CPC. You had a large fringe of the population that they became rich, and there was the trickle down,
Yeah.
uh, like the trickle down they tell us about the West. In China, there's really a concept of shared prosperity. You see, I didn't say communist socialism, I say shared prosperity. And it's less aggressive word, it's not putting boxes, and it's much more positive. When you think about, we make the cake bigger, but not only will make the cake bigger, but we are going to share it better. In the West, what they did was to keep the cake really small, but then it's all for the elites. All for the elites. You are going to work 24/7. You'll have 3 jobs. And we are going to feed you with junk food, and you'll own nothing, and you'll be happy.
Okay, so let's go back to the Chinese chip bill. And we've all seen how US companies, we're talking about AMD, Nvidia, even TSMC is losing shares, values. It's lost, we're talking about 50 to 70% of shares that they have lost. Like AMD has lost 70%, TSMC has lost 50%, and many other US companies are losing their shares and values. I mean, here you have a massive industry in China buying 400 billion dollars worth of chips every single year, and you are trying to starve that business. And secondly, I was going to ask you about the bill that Biden put aside. He was basically telling US citizens that if you work for a Chinese company or you work in China, you have to leave your job right now, or um, you will lose your citizenship. What do you think about all of this?
It's just those are desperate moves. Just think about it. Just you need to be desperate. This is not
Yeah,
the attitude of someone winning. This is the attitude of someone who's losing.
yeah, yeah,
What is hurting the collective West is that China is beating the collective West at the game of the collective West. They are using capitalistic tools to win at that game. Why? Because they're hardworking, they're smart, they have a very, the system of meritocracy where you have the smartest people in China that get to the top level of the power. Unlike in the West, you have clowns. You become politicians if you tell people what they want to hear. If you deliver or not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can replace. It's not a real democracy. In China, what you have is an elite of leaders that, if you look at their background, they all most have scientific background. They are engineers. They are scientific maths. What you have in the West, look at the US. They are lawyers and bankers. Lawyers and bankers don't produce anything. The brain, the way they think, it's different.
yeah, yeah,
I've done my MBA in China with Chinese people, and my classmates were mostly engineers. Their level is just astonishing. you know
yeah.
they're very pragmatic, they're not emotional. I consider myself to be more emotional. We are not completely not the same. I'm a Westerners, they were like really pragmatic and so on. But I just realize that it's so more efficient, really. It's pragmatic. It's just no BS. It's no BS. We have a scientific approach, and that's how they do planification: 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. And they think in terms of next generation. What is the world we are going to build for the next generation? What do we have those talks back home? I mean, we are talking about the constant division. There's a new one elected right now, is going to destroy what was done by his predecessor. You saw Biden is undoing what Trump was doing. I mean, they work for the same elites. I mean, they're pretty much the same, but there's no vision. It's not like, okay, we have a common dream for our country. What are we going to build for the next 50 years? China, they had some objectives, like they went from zero high speed railway to a massive railway system, tangible infrastructure. And you can go there and you just see, when you go to Shanghai, first experience you have, you land into Pudong Airport, one of the most modern airports in the world. You take a train which is going 400 kilometers per hour all the way to the center. You arrive in Pudong area and you have an astonishing skyline, just the most modern city. And you realize, oh, in 2 or 3 hours, your perception of China has completely changed, and you become humble. You realize, well, it's almost intimidating. So yeah, it's just
You're
another world.
100% right. Yeah, you're 100% right. Now, last time I was in China was 10 years ago, but I can imagine how much things have changed since then. I recently saw some images of a new railway line in Shenzhen. I think it's Railway Line 14 in Shenzhen. Looks amazing in terms of architecture and everything that they've done to it. It looks amazing. But I was
Yeah,
going to also, oh,
yeah.
sorry. I was
So
also going to bring, yeah, go
you
on.
mentioned.
Sorry, go on.
I
Yeah.
remember, just to give you an example, 27 years ago from Hong Kong to go to Guangzhou, it would take me pretty much like 16 hours. Now, the same ride takes me 2 hours. It's door to door. We're talking
Yeah.
about comparing door to door.
Wow.
Unbelievable, unbelievable.
Yeah, so we'll talk about infrastructure in a bit, but I wanted to finish up with those Chinese scientists who have been absolutely being being treated quite, I would say, disgustingly in the United States. There's a guy called An Ming who was arrested by the FBI, and he was put in jail. He went through a really messy court case twice. Twice. The first time it was a hung jury, and the second time the case got dismissed. And this went through years, and he got absolutely hounded. And I saw some of the clips, and the prosecutor was using really like disgusting language, like this guy works for a totalitarian regime, and he was calling China, a communist CCP. It was being really, really rude and disgusting. And he was just an ordinary scientist, and obviously they couldn't find any evidence against him. They threw away the case. But for years, the FBI hounded him. But it's not just him. There's other Chinese scientists as well. And no wonder you have a lot of Chinese scientists now moving to China. And I think the last estimates is 1,400 Chinese scientists left US 2021. And in 3 months alone, 1,500s have gone from December to March. In 3 months, another 1,500. So obviously this number is probably increasing this year over the past 6 months. What do you think about all of this? What do you think about all this victimization against the Chinese and things like
Well,
that?
are you surprised? You mentioned the FBI. I mean, the FBI, they build a case against their own government, their own president. The Russia Gate was built by the FBI with the cooperation of the FBI. They even raided his property. I mean, I'm no fan of Trump. Trump is uh, a hole, right? It's just a stupid, the way he talks and so on. But that's what they did to their own president. And I'm not even talking about the canceling in social media. Uh, that's the FBI. Those Chinese, they have no problem going back to China, and they'd be happy. They'd be happy to go to China, back to China. But I want to mention one thing. About this containment of China when it comes to technology. When you look at the what we call the SMET, graduates, people that graduated in science, math, technology, and engineering. China, if you look at the figures, I think it's around 7 to 8 times more than in the US. But then if you look at the US, 50% of those graduates in the SMET industries, they are foreigners, and actually 40% are Chinese. So in reality, you have 12 to 13 times more graduated engineers in China than in the US. You cannot stop that. In the microchip industry, they have some edge. They have some edge In terms of technology, what the US and the collective West is doing with Taiwan is 3 to 5 nanometer. China is already at 7 nanometer. It's just a matter of time that China is going to catch up. And very often, China, they say there's a saying, they say 以退为进. It means turn a setback into an opportunity. That's what they've been doing. The same as Russia did. You know what happened with Russia, the sanctions in 2014? All those sanctions were turned into opportunities, because then you force your own entrepreneur just to focus on your own economies, and you find solutions. Those setbacks turn into opportunities. Same as China. You want to contain us? You don't want us to have microchips? We'll find solution. And you become more creative. When you have restriction, you become more creative.
Yeah,
How I
yeah.
them. So it's just a matter of time, and this is a reaction of someone that is losing.
Exactly. And I made a video about this yesterday, and you're right, it's just a matter of time. And when you back someone in the corner, they will find a solution. And the whole 1.4 billion population of China they're all focused on this together, and they will find a way sooner or later. I was also going to talk about the Chinese space station, and recently the final module went into place, and then the Americans are absolutely freaking out, because the International Space Station, they call it the International Space Station, but it's not really an international one, because they don't allow countries like China, Iran, many other countries as well. And Russia is leaving the International Space Station. So they are looking to completely disable it within the next 5 to 6 years, which means the Chinese space station is going to be the only space station remaining in space. I mean, what do you think about that? And I heard that Americans, or especially NASA, is now asking for US astronauts to go into the Chinese space station, even after the Chinese were rejected from the International Space Station. I mean, what do you think about all of this stuff
Well,
that's
it's
happening?
funny you mentioned this. Just today, I was reading some statistics, and actually, the rockets sent by Russia and China combined are the double that the US is launching. That's a quite scary figure when it comes to comparing the collective West and the new multipolar world. So there's an advance there from China, and China really is looking to like some very interesting project, space exploration. Just maybe some mining to the moon and Mars.
Yeah.
And that's the next quite very interesting project. Especially, I don't know if you're familiar with the helium-3. Are you familiar
Yeah,
with that?
yeah, of course, yes, of
That it
course.
could be there could be a breakthrough in in the
Fusion power.
in fusion technologies. So lots of new project, and I think
Mm.
it's a mix of. I mean, they're scared. The collective West is scared about those achievements, and they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be. Because I like to say that China. But because I kind of understand the way they think. China is not hegemonic. China is very self-centered. So there's no more country more self-centered than China. They want to take care of their own people. Some people might call it nationalistic and so on. No, China. China is a continent in itself. It's a world in itself. They don't need the rest of the world. They've been closed for many, many years. Before 1979, China was completely closed. Now China, it wants to prosper, but China not only has ambition now for China, but China has ambition for the world, and it really wants to build a sustainable world, peaceful world, and without trying to export any ideology, and really with this concept of win-win. It's not about I'm going to rape everything. It's for me. It's how I can. What do you have? What I have, and the traders, the businessmen. The nature of Chinese. I mean, most of the time they're really down to earth. It's like, how much do you make? I mean, yeah, it's about really tangible stuff. We can talk about philosophy, but how well, what kind of business do you do? It's they don't. That's what they like. That's in
Yeah,
their DNA. They like to do business, and and they want to strive. They want to have a better life. And they're hardworking. And so
yeah,
can you beat that? We can't beat that, really.
yeah,
And
100%.
it's not about beating that. It's about how we can work together. Work together in peace and not repeating those wars that are over and over that repeats. This Thucydides trap. When you have an upcoming power, and then it needs to end up into a war. We have the opportunities now because it's China, and because China is not hegemonic, to have a new multipolar world that is going to be very positive for the humanity.
Exactly. And you mentioned helium-3, and you're 100% right. Helium-3 is used for the fusion, up and coming fusion power. And fusion is always 10 to 20 years away, but I'm hearing some really good breakthroughs coming out of China. I think they still hold the record for the longest amount of fusion reaction in the world. And this is longer than ITER. ITER is the alternative fusion power station in France. And helium-3 is the main power source. So I think whoever can get this fusion power up and running and can get an unlimited source of helium-3 will be able to rule the world, because all of that you will have literally unlimited amount of energy. So it's really, really good news. We're coming up to an hour, so I just want to answer this last question a viewer has said. We keep hearing in the media how China is headed for an economic downturn and not too distant future, as the aging population cannot be replaced in time due to the previous one China policy. Is that true? But before you answer, answer, Angela, I want to give you my thoughts as well. And this is one of the things I'm not, sometimes I am critical of the Chinese government, and I think having the one China policy was a mistake. They should have had at least two-child policy, because equals out in the end of the day. But I can understand why they did it at the time, because there was huge famines going on, and they were really worried about whether they can feed their population, and there was a lot of issues. So I felt that they had to do it. But I think they kept it on for a very long time. They kept it on for such a long time, and I thought they should have got rid of it years ago, maybe about 10 years ago. However, it's not the end of the world, because the world is moving towards automation. If you look at a lot of these factories, they are being replaced with robots and stuff like that, AI. So even if China loses its population, it's not going to be the end of the world. And you have to think about the future as well. When China becomes the number one economy, what's going to happen? You're going to have a huge amounts of migrants coming into China, economic migrants, basically coming in. They want to look for a better world. This is what happened in the United States. When the United States was a sole superpower, their population more than tripled in 10 years, because everyone wanted to go to the United States, the American dream and things like that. So I don't think China should worry about their demographics right now. I still think that there's a lot of positives, because they've got rid of the one China policy, which is good, and they are making steps helping out families who have more than one children. I heard some stories that they are helping families, and third main thing is they are going to be getting a lot of migrants coming in, and it's not going to affect them economically, because most of the factories are automated, most of them are done by robots, so it's not going to affect them that much. What's your thoughts, Angelo?
I think it's a very good question. I do, there's several parts. One is the economic downturn. I think we need to be extremely careful. Some people like Gordon Chan has been writing books about the coming collapse of China. I mean, for 20 years he's been saying China is going to collapse, and so on and so on and so on. I think we need to really look at fundamentals. Really, China has had double-digit growth for too long. Now what is happening in China is a soft landing. There's a critical mass. It's not going to be the 10% they used to have. It's going to be a more reasonable, but it's still going to prosper, and it's going to still uh, overperform the at least the collective West. Now, you mentioned the one China policy. I think you need to look at the history. Back then, they didn't have the productivity, in terms of producing food that you have right now. That China has done leaps, amazing leaps when it comes to productivity. So I think it's if you put that into the context, it was a wise decision, really. And I think those decisions are part of what makes China now strong. Is it now? A lot of people are saying, well, the GDP is not going to grow in terms of absolute figure. I'm not talking about percentage, just absolute figure. Just because you have less population or stagnant population, you don't have an absolute figure which is going to grow. I'll give you an example. In the US, you have a population growth, which is mostly done by immigration. Let's say around 1%. That's actually 1% which is added to the GDP, roughly. So China won't have that. But is it the most important figure? We need to actually review those concepts of GDP. Maybe you have other benchmarks. Just I think just GDP on the first place should be purchasing power parity. And I think what China is looking at right now is quality of growth. And also that growth needs to be a shared prosperity. That's a huge difference. So
Mm.
they will to have less growth, but to have it being shared much better. And that's the new direction China is taking. Because keep in mind, uh, China is still a socialist country. The ultimate goal is to create a socialist society, more sharing the wealth. What they did in 1979 under Deng Xiaoping, the opening up and the reforms was about how we can get investment, getting transfer of technology. China, what they did was to pretend that China was going to liberalize and to become a Western controlled democracy. No, you saw, I say Western controlled democracy, not a Western democracy, because the West wanted to control China. China, they pretended to do that because they really need investment, transfer of technology, and that's what they did. They used capitalistic tool to get where they are. Now, what the people are calling for is, more socialist economy. There's going to be a a fairer, more fair share of wealth. I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's not going to be communist, the USSR communist, but people are asking, and it's legitimate. It's about the CPC is legitimate if it's delivering, for everybody, not only the rich. That speech to make a small proportion of Chinese to be rich in the 80s, and then it will trickle down. That worked in the 80s. Now it's about delivering, because otherwise it's just a repetition of what is being done in the West. In the West, we say, oh, we need to protect the rich, because the rich, the elites, are the one that actually create job and innovation. And it's part of the capitalistic project. In China, it won't work. It won't work. It did work at a certain economic stage, growth stage. Now China is going to be gradually more going to the socialist path, but it's going to be, still market economy, but mixed, but share prosperity. That's a nicer word than socialist, to my opinion.
You're 100% right, Angelo. And we're kind of coming up to the end of the show. And also, I just wanted to mention the GDP figures. Even though earlier on it was double digit, as you know, when you times 1 times 2, then double that equals, 2 times 2 equals 4, double
Exponential.
that, yeah, exactly. So in the beginning, the numbers are small and it's quite easy to get the double digits. But once once your economy starts hitting the trillions, then it might seem that the percentage wise is smaller. But if you look at the actual numbers, the actual numbers is still high. We're talking about trillions added to the GDP, and if you measure it in percentage, obviously the percentage will go down, because that's how numbers
Absolutely.
work. And then you also have to understand that the Chinese GDP figures is still going to be much higher than the US, still going to be much higher than Europe. So even if China doesn't reach its 5% target, it's still 3-4% higher than the West, which means they are still catching up to the West. End of the day, it's all about the long-term game. It's not about how much GDP you make this year, that year, or double 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 digits. If the West was doing double digits and China was doing 3 or 4%, then obviously that's a problem. But that's not the case. The China is still doing 3 to 4%, and you have to understand they are running the economy with one hand around their backs, with all of these lockdowns and many issues and supply chains and many other issues around the world, and obviously the decoupling happening as well from the United States. So there's a lot of problems, and I think that 3 to 4% is a very, very good figure considering all of the issues that they're having. But you've got to compare the GDP to the West, and again, you know, is still higher than what the West could muster. I think the West is, I think UK is at the moment is 0%. Europe is probably 0%, and United States will probably be between 1 to 2%. Obviously I'm not sure, but really depends how the next few months go. Fed's increased the interest rate, so that's going to probably hit them hard. So that's going to go down. So we'll see it by the end of the year. So before we go, Angelo, I mean, do you want to give any last thoughts about the United States midterm elections? How that's going to be before you go? And do you want to give any
Well,
last thoughts on that?
well, to be honest, well, probably, I mean, in terms of result, probably the Republicans are going to have a big win, but ultimately, uh, not much will change. I like to compare with China. China, there's always the same party in power, although there are lots of currents. There's a lot of democracy within that party, but the policies change. In the US, the power change all the time, but the policies don't change. So you see, it's very counterintuitive. In reality, it's still the same. Not much will change. I have some hope maybe when it comes to Ukraine, but I'm not sure. It's going to be the same. It doesn't change much. Really, who you need to look at who controls, who funds those politicians, and they are all the same. They need to create this illusion of divisions, because if people see that there's too much collusion between them, they work together, well, then it shuts down the whole illusion of democracy and free will and freedom, etc. So they need to keep as much as possible to show the people that are voting that there are divisions, but they have not. I mean, really, can you tell me, it's societal, it's actually meaningless. All those societal issues are meaningless. Are you pro-choice or not? It's not something that people think all day long. Are you pro-LGBT or all this BS? People, this is marginal thinking. Average Joe, what they think it's about tangible stuff. Do I have a better life today or not? And that's what they want. They want to raise a family, and that's what they're asking the people. And the politicians, they do it on purpose. They do diversion. They diverse the, and a war might be actually a good solutions. It's the fault of Putin, bad Putin. We things are going bad. In the US, it's because of Putin. It's just they need the scapegoat.
Exactly, Angelo. So we'll leave it there. We'll obviously, sorry, it lasted a bit longer, but when I talk to you, I feel like I could talk to you all day. There's so much topics to talk about. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Angelo. I hope the viewers enjoyed our conversation, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe. You know what to do, guys. And thanks, Angelo. Any last words to anyone before you go?
Or just keep yourself informed, to the viewers. Keep a critical mind. Really, just do your research. It's important. It's important just to always follow alternative news, and and just question. Just keep a critical mind.
Exactly. Thanks, Angelo. I really appreciate you coming in, and hope we can chat again very soon. So enjoy Hong Kong, and yeah, I'll see you soon. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for coming on board. Really appreciate it.